Hello everyone, my name is James Strong, and this is the April KubePhilly meetup. We'll be talking with the Datree founder and CEO about the open source CLI. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everyone realizes that this is a CNCF event, so that it is under the CNCF Code of Conduct. If you have any issues with someone or with myself, please go ahead and report that to the CNCF. With that, we'll go ahead and get started with some of the announcements. I think that you guys should be aware of what things that are happening around in the environment. So Docker just announced this month that they are supporting SBOM, so software bill of materials can be generated from your containers. If you haven't heard about what SBOMs are, we probably should have a talk about that. So I'll make sure to get that on the schedule. But basically, it's just the recipe understanding of everything that's running inside of your applications or your containers. With that, SIFT is also now supporting signed SBOMs. So the attestations are now available using the SIFT toolset. So this is again on their blog post talking about how you can sign the SBOM attestations with cosign and store it so that folks can understand and trust what is running inside your containers is what they say is running inside them. Another update, KubeVirt became an incubating project. I actually haven't had a chance to use KubeVirt myself. So it's an interesting concept being able to run virtual machines on Kubernetes clusters. So really cool concept that actually came out today. So I want to make sure folks saw that if they use KubeVirt or if not, definitely something else that we probably should have a talk on. I'm interested in learning. That's mostly what I use these meetups for, or for my own learnings. If you haven't heard, as of 124, the Docker shim is going to be removed from Kubernetes. And there is a tool that will allow you to understand if your workloads are running with Docker as the runtime right now. So there's lots of information out there. I put the blog post out there that was posted back in November. Lots of information. If you have any questions, please reach out or ask anyone in the group. There is an open source project out there, the detector for Docker sockets, a kubectl plugin that you can install and run against your workloads. You can test that and see if you are running workloads with the Docker shim. Important to know when you're upgrading to 124. As always, there's always deprecations inside a Kubernetes release, so be prepared for that. KubeCon is next month, so I want to give everyone an update on that. Also, since I will be going to KubeCon and be taking a long needed vacation, I won't be posting, we won't be running a meetup next month for May. So there's that. So if you want to attend, I think it's $20. I'm not 100, I probably should know that, but it is virtual and in person as well. So that's what's been updated, what's going around in the CNCF space that I'm aware of. As always, I want to give folks a few minutes to talk about projects that they're working on, if they're looking to be hired or if they are looking to hire folks. So we'll go around the horn. If you're new, if you want to introduce yourself to the group as well, this is your time to do that.
I can start. Dodd Peffer. I work for VMware. I've recently been working on exploring the Cartographer project, which is an open source project that VMware has sponsored, and it's an underpinning of the Tanzu application platform. So they're doing some interesting stuff in building an application platform and implementing CI/CD using choreography and Kubernetes control plane loops. So been pretty excited diving into that over the last couple of weeks. That's it.
Sounds interesting. What are you doing in June, Dodd?
I suspect it's like, is there a topic that I'd want to present? Sure, I'd be thrilled to. Yeah, I'll drop a link on Cartographer.
No, that'd be interesting because I've been doing a lot of work lately with Tecton. Is it similar to Tecton?
It actually, the Tanzu application platform would bundle Tecton within it, and the choreographer would, and in the example implementations would stamp out Tecton pipeline run resources at various stages that then could execute a pipeline. So it's fundamentally a different concept than Tecton, but it leverages Tecton for some of the work it's doing.
Awesome. Okay.
The other thing, maybe just because you brought it up, KubeVirt. So working with VMware, we know a little bit about virtual machines as well. My understanding as I've researched into KubeVirt is that it's not necessarily running virtual machines in Kubernetes. It's using Kubernetes to describe virtual machines and allowing Kubernetes control plane loops to reach out into the appropriate APIs to run the virtual machine. So, just maybe a small technicality of whether the virtual machine is actually in Kubernetes or you're using Kubernetes to manage and perform lifecycle management and monitoring of the virtual machines, which I think maybe is a little bit more accurate there.
No, thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful. Like I said, I hadn't ran it. That does make sense. It's using the control plane like as a provider from a Terraform perspective, saying run this. But okay.
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for that, and
sure.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yep.
Well, if no one else has any projects or anything that they'd like to talk about, we can go ahead and get started with our presentation today. So I'm super excited about this. I'm always looking for new tools or things to help out. So policy management's a big thing in Kubernetes nowadays. So with that, we'll hand it over to, and I'm going to apologize. Is it just Simon?
It's Shimon.
Shimon? Okay. So Dana didn't tell me that. All of our communications have been over digital. So I appreciate your time today. I know it's a little late for you, and that's why it's a little early for us. So thank you for coming today. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. I'm a fellow CNCF organizer as well. I run the CNCF Tel Aviv community. We had a meetup last week or 2 weeks ago. We had 80 people show up. It was around the Kubernetes resource management. So indeed, a very interesting topic. So if I could share my screen, please. I would love to share with you some of my slides and tell you a little bit more about myself. Great. Okay. So can you confirm that you can see my screen? Yes.
Yes,
thank you.
See your screen. Thanks.
Cool. So we're going to talk today about how to prevent Kubernetes misconfigurations, preventing incidents from causing your business operations to fail, So my name is Shimon Tolts. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Datree. As I said, I'm a CNCF organizer, and I'm also an AWS community hero. So my flavor of Kubernetes is EKS, but it's okay. We have customers that run AKS, GKE. We have some pain-loving people that run it themselves. Everyone can do whatever they want. So it is really great to be here. But my focus is for this talk to be technical and to talk to you really about how you can take some of the things that I'm going to talk about around policies and integrate them into your workflow and help you propagate development standards for your operations teams and developers, and to give sort of a guardrails to help people do it. So a spotlight. Okay, so Datree is a policy enforcement solution. So really we saw a lot of incidents and a lot of policies, and basically it's an open source project. We have more than 5,000 stars, and it is very popular. And we got to this because, in my previous role, I was the general manager of the infrastructure division for a company, a media company called Iron Source. They recently IPO'd, and we had 400 engineers. And really, one of the main challenges was like when you work in a GitOps way with Kubernetes, it is really hard to continuously enforce development standards. It can be the simplest things. It's like, let's make sure we have a liveness probe and a readiness probe. Guess what? If you have 400 engineers that you need to tell them to do it, it's not that easy. And maybe it's obvious to us, but it's really not obvious to everyone. And the question is really, how do you delegate those infrastructure as code responsibilities? Because you don't want to be a bottleneck as a DevOps team, SRE team, whatever. You don't want to be a human debugger for YAML code, you know? And you really want to empower engineers to be able to make changes, build applications on top of Kubernetes. But how can you do that and really sleep well at night and make sure that they can make changes and they can feel safe and you can feel safe that it will be okay after they commit the code and push it to the CI/CD pipeline? And there are a lot of stories of misconfigurations. We're going to talk about some of them. And I put in 3 main categories. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat, in the Q&A, jump in, just ask questions, raise your hand, whatever you want. I'm a very dynamic speaker, so feel free. So really, I think that there are 3 main categories in terms of errors. So one of them is syntax errors. So you just made a typo. You know, your YAML structure is invalid. It's not a valid YAML, or your Kubernetes schema is invalid. And it's not only the Kubernetes schema. Today, we also support additional CNCF native solutions. So maybe you use Argo CD and it uses native CRDs. But guess what? Your kubectl doesn't know anything about those CRDs until you apply it to the cluster. So when you're actually writing the YAML files, maybe you're mistaken and you're writing the invalid schema, but you have no way of knowing it because the CRDs are in the server and it's really hard to have all of them. By the way, a small spoiler, we're now working on a repository to actually have all of the CRDs gathered for all of the cloud native applications that run on the cluster. And this way you can use other tools like kubeconfirm or Datree or other solutions to actually validate them. The second thing is, there are knowledge issues within the teams. Maybe developers think that running the latest Docker tag is the best. It's the latest tag. It should be the best. It's the latest. Why not use the latest? And they just don't know it. So there is a knowledge gap. And I got to tell you, even if you're the most sophisticated DevOps engineer, you might also have a knowledge gap because there are small things and there are really a lot of things that you need to remember. And the third thing is really aligning the team around your organizational development standards. I'll give you an example that is very popular. Maybe you're using a JFrog Artifactory. You have your own container registry and you don't want people to pull containers from the internet, and they might be vulnerable, there might be issues, and those are things that you want people to know. Only Arch users are qualified for using latest. I always love those groups because I feel at home with the jokes and everyone. So those are the 3 main issues that I think that usually we encounter, syntax, knowledge, and team alignment. And it sucks because maybe some of you can tell me what is the syntax error here. Does anyone know what is the error? It is very stupid. There are 3 dashes here, which makes it valid. And there are only 2 dashes here, which makes it invalid. And guess what? Being a human debugger is not the best thing for us as humans. So those things, you gotta validate. Otherwise, there is no way for you to know. The second thing is, validating syntax errors. Again, make sure that your Docker file is valid, the YAML files, the JSON files, and it happens all the time. And it's not only making sure that the syntax is correct in terms of the word that you're writing. Zalando had an outage because they put the wrong code block they put the scheduler configuration in the wrong code block. So they were like, we have the code that tells it what is the right scheduler, but it was in the wrong place. So it caused them an outage. And it's really, really hard as a human to see it because you might have the right thing in the wrong place. And of course, following best practices, again, it's challenging because here's an example with a tool that I really love, Argo CD. A simple example, if you're using a config map in Argo CD, guess what? You have to actually have a label that says that it is part of Argo CD. Now, how are you supposed to remember those things from the top of your head every time? And usually what happens is you apply it, it goes to the cluster, you don't see it on Argo CD, you don't understand why it's not working, you have 6 hours of debugging just to understand that you forgot a stupid label, you know? So, yeah. So how to improve? How can we make things better? Because I'm not gonna go misconfiguration by misconfiguration because there are really endless amount of misconfigurations. By the way, if you go to our docs, we have a lot of misconfigurations, like why are they caused? Why is it a misconfiguration and how to fix the misconfiguration? So I'm gonna link that really as an educational piece. You can then, I don't know, do whatever you want with it. We really love it. So first thing is learn from other companies. So an example, the Target head is, Blue Matador head is they did not put a memory limit on a container. And guess what? This container had a bug that had a memory leak. And this memory leak consumed all the memory. And guess what? The node started killing things and there started to be issues with that. So it's really important to put limits and again, learn from other companies. A problem the Target had is that they used the wrong concurrency policy for a cron job. And instead of using forbid or replace, they used allow. And what happened is they had a script. They had a script that actually spawns a cron job container every minute. But what they thought that will happen is that if it is running, because of the concurrency policy, it will only have one container running. And because they forgot to put it into forbid or replace, what happened is they had 4,000 containers spawning and it really bombarded their cluster. And the second thing is really you need to delegate the knowledge to your teams, because just looking and knowing that it's a problem, it's a good start, but how do you delegate those things to your teams? So we believe that enforcing best practices, providing guardrails is really the way to go. So you can ensure that everybody in the team follows the best practices and that they are aligned with you on what has to be the right solution. So we believe that in every way in every step of the pipeline, you should be able to know if you're making a mistake, and you should not be, you should not be thinking to yourself, wait, I need to read the entire misconfiguration guidelines to think whether I have a problem or not. I was just reading chat. In order to do so, first of all, you can scan your configuration files, Helm charts, Kubernetes YAML files, customized files in your coding station, in your IDE. So let's say VS Code. We have a VS Code extension. Other tools exist as well. Create a pre-commit hook. So before people commit, it really runs the scans in order to verify whether it's correct. Then have workflows in your CI and in your CD. And then finally scan your production. But of course, we know it is kind of late, but it's also an option. So number one, you want to really define the policies for your team. So you need to decide for yourself, what are the right policies for you? So you can take a solution like Open Policy Agent and have Conftest and Gatekeeper, which are great tools. One challenge is that they don't come with predefined policies. So you can pick and choose and start gathering things from the internet, and you don't have a centralized policy management. In other solutions like Datree, for example, it has predefined rules. So you don't need to actually start thinking what are the right rules. You just need to decide whether you want to enable them or not, whether you want to use them or not use them. So you define the policies, So you say, for example, every cron job has to have a deadline. Every container has to have a liveness or readiness probe. And you distribute it within your CI/CD pipeline. And then when a developer makes a code change, it will propagate into CI, start to build it, and it will check whether it is according to the policy. And if not, it will actually fail the job. And the developer will see, why is it failing? What am I supposed to do in order to fix this issue? And guess what? We hope that it won't even reach the DevOps team. They will be able to go and actually fix the problem by themselves. So defining the policies and wanting them is only the, it's only the beginning. Because after you do that, you really want a way to manage your policies. So first you need to know what policies do you want. Then you need to choose them. Then you need to distribute them. But an organization is a living, breathing thing. So you need to have a way to easily and dynamically adjust the policy, because you don't want to have to open 100 pull requests to different repositories in order to change a parameter. Maybe you decided that you don't want to have 3 gigabytes of memory limit, you want to have 4. So what, are you going to open 200 pull requests now? It's a problem. So having a centralized solution to manage your policies and to distribute them across the organization is important. Because another caveat here that might happen is that if you don't have a centralized policy management solution, different people will have different versions of the policy. And you have yet another nightmare to try to configure. It's like, not only that you're trying to get people to use the right configuration for the cluster, now you need to make sure that they use the right policy version that is the latest for your organization. So instead of having a solution, you have yet another problem on your head. So yeah, make sure you can dynamically adjust the policy. Secondly, is really to control, review, and monitor the policy. And again, even if you're using, and I strongly encourage you to use GitOps in order to manage your policies. For example, in the tree, we have a policies.yaml file. And in this file, you have all the policies. And then in a GitOps way, you can actually go and modify the policies. The thing is, it's only the beginning, because then you need to control who can create and edit and submit and commit to the repository. And maybe someone decided that they don't need a memory limit and they changed the policy, and it's a problem. So you need to have some sort of control system, control mechanism to be able to understand who can change the policy. And secondly, you need to observe the progress. Maybe you have a wrong policy. So you need a bird's eye view to see all the policies that are running in your CI/CD in people's computers and really iterate and dynamically fix them. And thirdly, of course, is you don't want your developers to be frustrated. So you want to provide them with guidelines on how to fix the issues. So when something fails, you don't want them to be like, oh my God, this stupid tool, failed. They want to be like, oh, this failed because I don't have a liveness probe. Here's a link to the liveness probe documentation, and here's an example repo inside of our organization of a hello world service and that has a liveness probe, and here is how you can do it. And then they feel empowered. On the one hand, you have guardrails. On the other hand, they're empowered. So does anyone have any questions so far? I just want to make sure that it makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So in order to achieve is there a code editor plugin which you can tell the issues dynamically? Yes. So we have a VS Code extension. You can see the tree VS Code. So when you actually write the code, it runs the tree test every time that you save the file. And then while you write the code, it will tell you that there are problems.
And you said you could set this up as a pre-commit hook as well, right? Because it's a CLI tool.
Yep. I'll tell you a secret. The VS Code extension just runs the CLI. You know, it's not so sophisticated. You know, and it's actually something that was really important to us. So as you can see, we have an open source project. It has more than 5,000 stars, more than 40 contributors. It is very alive, and people add code all the time. And all of our integrations, let's say we have a Helm integration. So actually the Helm integration is done using the same CLI. There is just a wrapper around it. And same thing goes for our GitHub action, for our VS Code extension. Everything at the end runs the CLI. And this is good because everything is centered at one place. So let's talk about a policy management solution. I'm showing the example on the tree. Of course, you can use other solutions, just like the concept. So as I see it, you want the solution to be integrated along the pipeline. And I look at two personas. I look at developers and DevOps engineers. Of course, those can be SREs or whatever you call them, you know, the titles these days, everything shifts. And the DevOps team actually configures the policy and defines what is a right policy in our organization. What do we want to use? The developers are the consumers of the policy. So for example, in the tree, we have two types of roles for tokens. When you generate a token, there is a reader token and a writer token. So a reader can only run policy tests, but they cannot modify the policy. But a writer test can actually do the tree publish and modify the policy. And think about it like a Docker container. So you build the container and you push it to a registry. With the tree is the same. You have the policies YAML, you modify the file, and then you do the tree publish, and then it propagates the policy. And then you can scan in development, as we said, for example, VS Code or CLI in your machine, in your CI/CD, in your CD pipeline in Argo. And you can also scan your production cluster. So we have a KubePhilly plugin. So you can actually do KubePhilly the tree test, and then it will connect to the cluster that this KubePhilly is connected to, download all of the manifests and scan them. And this can give you a status of what is currently happening. So how does it work? You really download the CLI solution or a Docker container that already has all of the CLIs inside of it. Then you run a test and you specify whether you want it to run in a specific policy or not, because we support multiple policies. So really easy, install it, run the test, and then you integrate it inside of your CI/CD. So this is a very simple example of this is a GitHub action. So it runs like npm CI, npm run, npm test, and then we just curl the tree and the tree test any YAML file inside the kube folder. And finally, here is a glimpse into policy management. So this is a glimpse into the UI. Of course, as I said, you can manage the policies using GitOps. So then you can't click in the UI, but you can still see the policies. And one of the nice things is that you can modify the fail suggestion. So what your developers will see is the message that you give them. So you can actually link it into their wiki. And that's about it in terms of the presentation. And I'm open to hear any questions that you might have and discuss about how you manage deployment and policies in your organization.
Mom, was there a webhook in Kubernetes that would prevent like Gatekeeper does, an object from being created if it failed a policy? I missed that.
Yes, so we currently don't have it. It is in active development. So we
Okay.
have like IDE, CLI, CI, CD scan already running resources. And
Right.
now we're actually building the admission webhook that will call the tree, and then it will deny or allow the creation or modification of a resource. And it will be the first solution that actually has the same policy from dev to production. So you really hit it on the nail. It is. What else would you like to see?
Well, the reason why, because my own company has a solution that implements the admission webhook but doesn't have the other capabilities. So it's interesting that that fits everything else. So good. And you mentioned all the policies are essentially managed on the policy server.
Yes, so this is one. So you can always take the open source solution, and we have like a tag that you can run it, like I call it headless without the SaaS, and you can bring the policies. But the default mode that most people use is that the policies are integrated. Maybe I can show you. So this is the docs, and here we have different built-in rules. So when you go into a rule, so let's say ensure a container image has a pinned down version, pinned down tag. So you will see like, okay, which one of the kinds it talks about, is it enabled? And then it's like, why does it fail? It fails because you're using a latest or not using a tag at all, and the output. And then how do I fix it? You put in a pinned down version or a SHA. It's like, it seems very simple, and it is simple because we try to make it dead simple for people to be able to do it. And if we look at the dashboard itself, it looks like this. So we have different rules, and you can enable and disable them from the dashboard. And this is like the initial state. Usually people then switch to GitOps mode, where they manage the policy as code. It really makes sense, as we are a solution for infrastructure as code. But this just gives you a glimpse. I can create a new policy. I could call it CF, and we create it. And then I might say, okay, so maybe in containers, I want to have a liveness probe and readiness probe. And now those are the policies. And maybe I want to say, maybe I want to change the, it seems like we have some UI issue here, but you can change the failed suggestion. And then this is what I will see. And you also have a history of all of the running checks. And you can see which version of the schema did we run it against. And we did not talk about it much here, but one of the, and I'm working actually on a video now on, because EKS version 1.22 was released with Kubernetes 1.22, and there's a huge deprecation in the ingress controller, a huge one. So actually creating a guide, and one of the advantages is that you can actually run the tree test and specify the Kubernetes schema that you want. So you can specify 1.22.6, which is the future one, and check all of your resources before upgrading. And you can also check the ones that are running in the cluster now to make sure that they're compatible.
So funny you should mention that, because I'm also the Ingress Nginx maintainer. I'm one of the three, and we had to put together a lot of documentation around that upgrade.
Huge one, huge. Gonna break a lot of things.
Yeah, get a lot of open issues about that, and we're like, read the deprecation policies.
Yeah, but again, you know, our customers, they have hundreds of workloads. Now you want to upgrade. How the hell do you know? How do you know? You need to write scripts to try to find it.
Exactly.
So you can use the tree. Okay, another question. Does the tree have integrations with replicated tools for validation of state of validation current application deployments? Maybe you can help me understand the question.
Will always comes with good questions. You might have to go off mute, Will, and explain that one.
and I was double muted, so I thought I was off mute. Thank you, James. All right, so are you familiar with replicated tools at all?
I know replicated that allows you to run the container at the customer, replicated.com, the company.
No.
No,
It is a container at the customer. Basically look up troubleshoot.sh. They have a little website that you can check out.
Yes.
That's their free version of their tools. But yes,
I
it
know
allows you, so it uses crew for the kubectl in order to validate the current state. And it's a way of handling troubleshooting for, let's say if you have an application that someone wants to run on-prem inside their own, like you have a customer that wants to run your application on their Kubernetes cluster. This is designed so there's like support bundles, that kind of stuff, so you can help them troubleshoot, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I was kind of curious if you have a way for validating the current state. Let's say I make a change through, through GitOps to a Kubernetes cluster. Is there a way to integrate with kubectl in the pipeline? Is there any like a native integration? So that way I can go through and run my support bundle stuff to ensure that the current state that's in the Kubernetes cluster is still meeting whatever needs and the checks are done with tools like, troubleshoot.sh or, what Replicated's using for their tool set.
So we also have a crew plugin.
Okay.
So we have a kubectl plugin. So you do and what it allows you to do is it allows you to scan any cluster that you have. Let me try and show you here. If we go here, we can look at the kubectl plugin. And what it does, you see kubectl crew install the tree, you install it, and then you scan all of the resources in your cluster, and you give it the version, you specify the version that you want. So then you can actually see here the tree test, and this is the version 1.22.0. And then you can see whether your current workload is compatible. Does that answer your question?
A little bit. So I posted I didn't press enter. Wow. So I posted a little bit of what's going on there for like, they have a pre-flight checklist thing. And if you see that, just watch the little demo up top. So you run the pre-flight on it, you give it your address for blah, 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 for like, whatever your cluster is, but it'll go through and it will actually go through and say, oh, your ingress isn't set up, that kind of stuff. This would be more of like a check to make sure a running application would meet certain criteria. So my question is there any, it sounds like what I would need is like my runners would need to run Datree stuff, and then separately it looks like there's no integration between Datree and something like this for getting validation reports for the specific application.
I think that you will run the tree and then you will run this check. I think that there are some things that are the same, maybe some things they check differently. I think it's this compatible in a way.
Okay. Well, if there's a feature request ever, I would like to see those two tools working together, because this means that if I have to hand a customer like a pharmacy how to run something on their local setup, that would be amazing. So that way, if there's an issue when they go to upgrade and there's a new change to their GitOps, I can say, hey, this application's running perfectly fine.
That is interesting. I'm going to check that with my product team. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Cool. What else? What else? Is anyone using here like Kyverno, OPA, any policy checks? Maybe, Todd, you want to tell me more about what you have in VMware?
Yeah, OPA. So the Tanzu Mission Control is a multi-Kubernetes cluster manager, and one of the things you can, enable and define are policies, and there's certain baked-in policies, and then the extension of OPA where you could define Rego policies. But if you attach your cluster, it will lifecycle manage Gatekeeper on your clusters, and then synchronize all the policies that you defined, centrally into any of the clusters under management.
And it has a centralized policy management that will propagate the policies to all of the clusters?
Well, there's agents on the clusters like, do I have any new policies? Do I need new? So it's more of a pool, but right. So that way you can consistently manage policies in one level.
Cool.
hierarchical cluster management. So, you can group clusters together and set policy at the cluster group level, and any cluster that gets added to that cluster group would inherit all the policies set above it or directly at it.
Is that Octarine?
It's not Octarine, although VMware did acquire Octarine.
What is it called?
Tanzu Mission Control.
Is it it's like free open source, or is it like a top-down talk to sales?
It's freemium now, so they just launched a starter free ability to consume this as a SaaS management product. But if you extend beyond a certain number of clusters, you would pay.
Could you send the link in the chat? I would love to check that out. Thank you.
Are the policies within Datree, are they Rego?
No, so we actually have more than 7,000 accounts. Tanzu Mission Controller, cool. So we have more than 7,000 accounts, and we actually surveyed before we built the custom engine. We surveyed the users, and we asked them, how do you want to write custom policies? And they're like, oh my God, Rego is a nightmare. We want something simple. We want something standard and easy. So what we did, we just used JSON schema, and you can write YAML or JSON, and really writing custom policies is very easy. Having said that, we're going to support Rego and Kyverno because we see ourselves as a layer on top of it. So we couldn't care less if you use Rego or Kyverno or whatever. We're the management, right?
So if I had a bunch of those policies already defined, I could use Datree to push those to other clusters, and it's the central management for pushing out those policies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we see the value in number one, we have a policy index, you could say, that is curated by us. So this is value number one. And value number two is, of course, the centralized policy management across the board, which is really the heavy lifting and the seamless integration. By the way, our product, everything is really simple. You download it, install it. You don't need to put a credit card, nothing. It's like, just try it out.
How much support do you have for working with ephemeral clusters? In other words, you have a lot of clusters that you're spinning up, and instead of taking like a giant cluster that'd be like a monolithic, you're literally bringing a cluster online, checking things out because you have a deployment with an entire GitOps solution. And when I say GitOps, I mean Terraform, Ansible, Python integration, all in a pipeline that gets you your turnkey application, and then starts going down through to make sure that you have little clusters for parts of an app. So instead of going microservices, you're going micro clusters even for different aspects. Is it really easy for using your product in order to add a cluster and delete it very easily through a pipeline, and then control it obviously with configuration?
Yeah, so for us, it doesn't matter because everything that happens in configuration files, we scan it, sort of like a static code analysis, you could call it. And everything that happens in terms of scanning clusters, all you have to do is to configure your kubectl to be wired to the correct cluster, and then we work against it. So
okay. So as long as you got control over the kube config, you're pretty much okay. Oh, that's perfect.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So thank you very, very much for having me. It was a pleasure. I got some homework for myself, so I'm going to go over it with my team. And it really sounds very, very interesting. And I'm gonna drop a note when we have the gatekeeper part of our solution ready to get your feedbacks.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for joining us and giving us a demo of the product. As always, if you guys want to give feedback, Shimon, I'm guessing you're pretty easy to find. If folks ask, I'll go ahead and just share your contact details. And if we have any questions or anything, I'll make sure to funnel those back. All right, I appreciate that. As a reminder, folks, I said that KubeCon EU is next month. I'm also taking a vacation around it, so we're not going to be doing that. Make sure to attend KubeCon EU virtually if you can. And we will get back to regularly scheduled program in June. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.